Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something that I have come to believe in more and more over the years of training, and it's the importance of doing high rep work for your lower back. And when I say high rep, I mean 10 or more reps. And a lot of it has to do with just general lower back injury prevention, because if we're going to train like athletes, that means we're going to do a lot of standing work. That doesn't just mean the squat and the deadlift, although those obviously come to mind. It means we're going to do a lot of standing work. There's always the potential for different stressors on our spine. There's always going to be potential for this stuff. And in general, that's the biggest complaints people get as they get older and they age. It's going to be lower back injury, disc degeneration, all of that stuff. And so for those of us in training, I think it's important that we address this proactively. Because a lot of my clients are like, man, why do you have me do so much high rep stuff for my lower back? And I do have all of them do it. And this is why. And if you look at what I do lately, you guys see me these days doing, not uncommon for me to do 4 to 6 sets of anywhere from like 10 to 12 reps of some type of good morning twice a week. And there's a lot of factors at play here. Number one, we're talking about injury prevention, but number two, there's going to be a work capacity and recovery element to it. Usually when we're thinking of lower back injuries, what's causing a lot of them? Well, incorrect bracing of the core, weak abdominals, all right, that's a big part of it. Potentially weak hamstrings, because when you have weak hamstrings and you are very anterior dominant, that can actually contribute to certain misloadings on your lower back when you're playing sports, running, jumping. It can happen even with a squat. All right, so if we think of a lot of these things, hamstrings matter, abdominals matter. So we should be training this stuff. And I these days, again, I also advocate large volumes of abdominal work. Just building a stronger core in general is a good idea. It's a good idea. But the focus of this is going to be on the lower back. Now, one of the other perks that we get, most of these high rep exercises for the lower back, such as what I'm doing, you guys see me doing in this video, I'm doing 2 very common variations of the good morning that I personally do, because I do these every week. Again, usually these days I tend to do them with chains on a Monday, and I do them with bands on a Thursday. But I do good mornings with a safety squat bar with accommodating resistance. So I do chain work and I do band work. And they're for relatively high reps. Well, I do these partially because I want the additional thoracic erector training. That's why I use that safety squat bar. So it puts a little more emphasis up top and a little less on the hamstrings, but the hamstrings are still working. They're still getting a stretch, and it's still training the entire kinetic chain. Now, a lot of times people would say, well, why are you using accommodating resistance? Why use something like chains on it? Well, because it lets me do basically more reps. I'm still getting the workload near the top for the T-spine up there by actually forcing it to lock a little bit heavier of a weight, while still getting the higher rep loading that I would get from my lower back and the stretch reflex on the hamstrings. Now that's further accentuated when we go to bands. When we go to bands, that stretch reflex becomes more intense. This creates an even stronger effect on the hamstrings when you do the bands. Even though people would think the strength curve would be similar because it's very similar levels of accommodation, it's the fact that it pulls you down faster. And that faster pull down, especially from the top, creates a larger stretch reflex in the hamstrings when we get to the bottom. But as far as the top end of it goes, the idea is the same. But by doing it with accommodation, it does allow me to get more total repetitions in at the deeper angle with the lighter weight while still doing it relatively heavy for the top. And that affects the top and low and bottom end of the back as well. But in this case, it allows me to get a lot of repetitions in. And it's getting those repetitions in for the lower back that we want. The reason for that, when you think of your spinal erectors, they're mostly connective tissue. That is a very low blood flow region. It is a region of our musculature that again has so much connective tissue and sinew and everything else. If you were to look at it, if you were to look at a human anatomy chart, you'll see what I mean. If you look at that when they show this is muscle and this is connective tissue, like the red and the white, it's way more white than there is red. That area is just covered in tendons. And it tends to have relatively poor blood flow. So by doing the very, very high rep training for it, we can help increase blood flow to it, increase blood vessels, capillary beds, all that stuff to all those little tiny muscles through there. Because something that's been noted by a lot of people out there, and you always see people say, oh, the lower back recovers really, really slow. Well, why do you think that is? And it has to do partially with, again, connective tissue versus actual blood flow all through there. It doesn't get a lot of blood flow. So by doing training like this to where we do that, we can increase the blood flow to it a little bit. Well, by doing that, we can speed up recovery. We can speed up recovery. We're not doing it because we think we're going to make our spinal erectors grow really, really massive. Because they're not. There's just not that much muscle tissue there. But what we can do is improve blood flow and recovery to them. Also, we're improving work capacity. Well, work capacity is a limiting factor there. So if we take an area of the body, in this case the lower back, and we start thinking in terms of recovery, general performance, all of that, if we can increase recovery to that region, and we can increase work capacity to that region, can we do more standing training? Can we get away with more squats, more deadlifts, more standing presses? Of course we can. And if we can do more training, we can gain more muscle and more strength. Because that's the problem we have with a lot of these exercises with axial loading. They're phenomenal exercises. Big structural lifts are phenomenal. But we have a continual battle that we fight regarding recovery versus stimulus. That is the biggest thing against these exercises. Anything that has axial loading or puts shear stress on the lower back is hard to recover from. So anything that we can do to improve the work capacity and recovery of that area will allow us to increase our total weekly loads on these sort of exercises. And if we can do that, we can get more benefits from them. So this is being done partially as a restoration tool. And I'd go so far as to say that if it becomes an issue for you, that there could even be merit to doing them with even lighter weight with band work on other days and doing very, very large amounts of reps. Right? Just like we oftentimes do for our abs, but doesn't that put a stretch on there also? So if we're doing a lot of like standing band crunches on off days, that also helps with that area. It helps increase blood flow to it. It can help a lot. And I'm just using one example. You could do hyperextensions. You can do other stuff. There's other options there. You have a variety of tools available. And like anything else, we can use a variety of different very good exercises for this purpose. These days, I choose to use these two variations of the good morning. For a while, though, I was doing hyperextensions on my glute ham device for it. And I was doing them every day for a while, doing up to sets of 20. But the idea is the same. We're increasing work capacity, blood flow, all of that to our lower back. Now the upside, most of these lower back exercises help with our hamstrings, don't they? Can an athlete have hamstrings that are too big or too strong? Pretty unlikely. And if we're doing all of this, what does this do for things like knee injuries and knee health? Well, it's tremendous. It's tremendous. Because again, one of the issues we have with knee injuries for various athletes, I don't care whether it's power athletes or field athletes, muscle imbalance, being quad dominant. And we need strong, powerful quads. Don't get me wrong, I'm not telling people not to train their quads. But being quad dominant puts a lot of stress on your knees. It can contribute over time to knee injuries. The extra hamstring work we're getting from all this lower back training can help with our hamstrings. I'm not saying it's the only thing we should ever do. Don't get me wrong, but it helps. It's a cumulative effect. So there is a down effect of this. It trickles down into other things. So by doing all of this, we're improving different work capacities and recoveries we need, but we're also helping prevent lower back injuries, helping prevent knee injuries, all of these things that we worry about as serious athletes. It's just a good idea to do this. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.